Hi everyone. Hi Mom. Okay, this is a requested video as well. I had shown how I do the envelope covers. So I was asked if I would show how I do my pages. Well, that's a really long video. I've been working on this book for close to 2 weeks, so there's no way I'm doing, I don't, edit and all that stuff. I'm not great at that kind of thing, which I've said before, but, I thought, well, maybe I could give you sort of an idea of what I do. I always start with my covers. That just sort of, everybody's different, right? I like doing the covers because then that sort of sets the theme for the rest of the book for me. So I try and find paper or a digital kit that I really like that suits what I've done. So because I did this one and it's pretty neutral, I decided I was going to go more with like a garden theme kind of deal. And to me, gardens are flowers, obviously, butterflies, birds, that kind of thing, right? So I have a digital kit by Ephemera's Vintage Garden, and I believe it's called Cottage Garden. So that's what I was working with. It was already downloaded. Now, I'm just going to show you the process. This is not finished. This is just how I put my stuff together. So first off, I decide how many pages I want. Now, when I mean pages, I'm talking single sheets of paper, if that makes sense. So I start off with an 8.5 by 11, whether I'm cutting it down or the kit is printed out and it ends up being a 4 by 6, whatever. One sheet is what I consider how many pages I'm using. So if you're looking at it this way, if you have one sheet, so let's take this. Now, in this book, I am using 3 sheets of cardstock. This is a Can Company. And the backgrounds are sort of butterflies and flowers and whatnot. And so I thought, perfect. I love the colors. It went quite well with the Cottage Garden. So that's kind of how I choose. I don't necessarily stick to exactly one downloaded kit. I might mix it up. It just really depends on how big. Because it's a single signature envelope journal. Now, somebody asked me what a signature is. This is a signature. Okay, one collection of however many pages, it could be 4 pages, whatever, but they're attached together and then they're sewn into either the spine with like a wider spine, or like I'm doing, which is going to be just a thin spine, which will only fit one signature, if that makes sense. My signature is a total of 18 pages, individual pages. What that means is you double it. So if I have 15 from the Ephemera's Garden, which I do, I have 15 pages, that gives me 30 writing surfaces. Okay? You double it. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's like, because it has a pattern on one side. So I'm only writing on this side. Okay, so there's 30 writing surfaces. I add, stationery that I make myself, whether it be scraps of paper from something I've cut up to add to my book, and, there's a good piece left over, I might tea stain it, coffee stain it, and turn it into stationery. It could be postcards that the back is, you can write on them. So in my mind, how I'm doing this is, if I'm putting something on a writable surface, I try and add back something else to make up for that space that I've now covered over and you can't write on it now. Does that make sense to you guys? So I'm just going to show you my process. I decide, do I want to add doilies? Do I want it coffee stained, tea stained, whatever? Do I want the book for photos? If I want photos in my book, I do not coffee stain or tea stain having said that, I will, if I put two surfaces together that are touching, that are not coffee or tea stained. And I'll show you what I mean as I flip through, this signature. In this one, I've decided to divide it into 3. So there's 3 doilies. There are 3 cardstock pages, and then the rest are Ephemera's Vintage Garden, which I've printed on I believe this kit I printed on a 28-pound printer paper because I had printed it out a long time ago. Now I use 32. It's a much heavier weight printer paper. I think it's actually called photo paper. I get it from redriver.com, which is down in the States. I'm correcting myself on that. I thought I read somewhere that it was a Canadian company. It isn't. It is from the States. So, shipping is great for you guys in the US for it. It's good for me because I have a box, so I just get it delivered there. And it's beautiful quality paper, just beautiful. And you get all different kinds of photo paper. And actually that's what Debbie Ann recommends that you print her digital kits on, which is what started me, onto this company. If you have one that's, fantastic, go for it. Anyway, okay, so that's kind of how I start. I start with what the kit's going to be, how many sheets I want to add. Do I want to add any like tea-dyed plain printer paper? In this case, yes. So what I did was, because I wanted to be able to add photos to this, I added my tea-stained paper to the center. So a lot of these surfaces are photo safe. Because really, as long as your photo isn't touching something that is, stained with coffee or tea, it's the acid in it that's what will eventually eat away at your photo. As long as it's not touching that, like this here, see, I've done my stationery. This is tea stained. Now, because it leached through this side, I can't put any photos, which is why I went with the butterfly, on the front, just to give it a little dress up. So then on this side, you see, I can, because nothing here has been tea stained. So then I figure out, I put it all together in the order I want to sew it together, and I keep it that way. And that way, if I'm doing something on this and I want it to coordinate with this side, I don't have to figure out, oh, did this page go with that page? I can't remember. So I keep it always bundled together, and it also helps me figure out how fat I'm actually getting. Like, this is getting fairly chunky for a single signature, and so sometimes I have to stop myself because I get carried away. Anyways, so that's what I'll do. Now I've grouped the Ephemera's Vintage Garden because they were printed. I printed on the back side, ran it back through my printer, and I have, lines saved as a file. So, that's what I'll do so that it's obviously a writing place. And so these are completely safe for photos. So I could add a little photo here if I wanted to. And I try and group it that way as I go. Okay, so then I separate it again with another doily. I add pockets. I do all of my embellishing, I do all my stamping, embossing, whatever I'm going to do with my book, I do it before it's attached. I know there are people out there who do it the other way, and great. If it works for you, wonderful, go for it. I'd have terrible success with that. I know that it's really hard not to put it together because you're really impatient. You want to see it look like a book. But my recommendation from having done it both ways is really try and wait, because you could be going through after it's all done and decide, oh, I wanted a pocket there, and then it's really tough to get it to lay right, or you might have to get in there with some staples. Well, now you can't, right? Unless you've got like one of those long arm stapler guns, which not everybody has. So I find like doing your corners, your side punches, anything like that, it's just easier if the book isn't attached. And then I decide, do I want to add some paper bags? Do I want to do them, you know, this way instead of upright? If I want to do them upright, I have to do them completely different. So all of those things are factors, and because I'm kind of stuck on these individual signature books, it does limit how much stuff I can actually put in there. So, you know, like an idea will start to percolate up there, and you realize, yeah, it's too late. I have way too much stuff in there. So I try and write it down in my ideas book and then use it in the next one. Because really, reality is you can't use all your ideas in each book. It just, unless you want a book that's that wide, and some people like that. I personally don't. I think they're way too big to actually write in. They're heavy. They look fabulous. I think they look wonderful. I love chunky and, you know. But if you're looking at it as a practical book that you really do want to journal in, then you need to be able to have it lay flat, you know, which is why when I do these, my embellishments tend to be pretty flat. Because if I'm flipping this over on this side, I can write on this. I have lines. Well, I can, because it's fairly flat. There's nothing like really hard, lumpy in the middle, you know, that prevents me from actually writing in my book. Yeah, so that's what I do. Same with the cover of the book. You can see that this one's pretty flat. It's really just a piece of chipboard, so it's pretty flat. So when that opens and my pages are open, I can write, you know, because it's fairly flat. So you want to keep that in mind. Same with laces. You know, flat laces like this work great because they add no bulk. They're pretty, you know, so they will dress up your book, but it won't bulk up your book. Even things like this with the flower, you know, I made the center myself, so it's not terribly dimensional. And if I'm adding something like this, I try and go either at the top, the bottom, or the side, where I'm leaving space in here to actually, you know, do some writing. Does that make sense to you guys? So then I decide, I'm on this kick where I like to do an envelope in the center because it does cover up some of the stitching. And I'm out of my really nice thread, so I'll be using like a waxed twine. And so I always do like a kind of a pocket or tuck spot, something like that, where I leave it open until I'm ready. And what I'll do is I'll take this tool, and let me find it in this horrendous mess. Okay. Really? It's got a bright pink lid. There it is. Okay, so this is from Memory Keepers, and on the end is a nice pokey tool. Really nice one. This end is meant for brads when you've got, you know, your tines and you want to press them open and flatten them. That's what that's meant for. So, kind of why I bought it, because I broke my pokey tool. I needed a new one, so I thought, oh well, you know, two birds, one stone. So this is what I use to create my holes. And this is what I do to figure out where I want my holes. I like doing the pamphlet stitch. There's all different kinds of stitching, you know, if you really want to get into that kind of thing. But I just printed out some graph paper, and I usually cut it to the length that I need it. So this one here is my length. I probably have one cut. Yeah, I do. So because this one I use for my that's really difficult to say together for me. Single signature. I have used this once, but have two separate holes because it really depends on where I want to put my holes. And that is, I judge that by my papers. In this one I have two different sizes of papers. I have the Ephemeris Vintage Garden, which doesn't quite meet up with what I've cut for the cardstock. The cardstock's bigger. So in that case, I'm going to use the hole that comes up higher. I make sure everything's lined up together, and sometimes I'll use like one of these clips two of them actually, one on either side. I find the best way for me, you know, I've tried this many different ways, is I get all my papers lined up. And I will clip them on one end, like here. Of course, I take all the ephemera out, all the, you know, stationery, everything that is movable, I take it all out. Then I will line up my pages exactly where I want them, standing up like this, and then I'll clip them together. So then I tip up my book like this, lay this in here so it's right in the spine and it's on a bend. I find that that way I get my hole in the spine like that. And then of course I always use a mat, like something like that, so I don't ruin my crafting mat. Go ahead and I poke all my holes, take that out, and then I've lined it up with this because I've already pre-done my holes in this. So that's the first thing I do, is that first, poke my holes, set it aside, line up this paper, poke my holes, then I keep them all together, and then I thread my whatever I'm going to use. Depending on your paper, you can use dental floss, you can use, I've used beading thread. It's very, very strong. Whatever you use, you want it fine, but you don't want it to stretch. If there's a give to it, don't use it, because eventually the weight of your papers will pull on that and your book won't be stable. Okay? So this is what I would use. And I got this at the dollar store, and it's waxed jewelry cord. It's nice and thin, so it can be tied in the center of this, and because once that's all sewn together, I pull this up, I glue it down its side, and there I've got a little tuck spot, and most of the stitching is hidden. Okay? Yeah, so that's, you know, I mean, just that alone took me 17 minutes to explain. So you can imagine putting a page together and saying, well, should I do this or should I do that? I just think it loses something in the translation. My thought processes are pretty slow. And it takes me a while to figure out what I want and where I want it. But like I start, you know, once I've got the elements that I want together, the pages that I want together, then I go, you know, okay, I go back. Once my embellishments are figured out, I'll go back and do my stamping. And if I'm not going to stamp, I'm going to stencil. I'm going to do something. Just keep in mind when you're doing something with tea-dyed printer paper, unless your printer paper is really thick, you will get a bleed through. Now I did get that on this. I did it here on this side first, and it bled through the other side, so I just flipped over my stencil and then just redid it over top. So it's no big deal to me, but when you're doing that with stamps, you can't flip the stamp over and use the other side. You've only got one side of your stamp. So you need to think about ahead of time, okay, if I put a tuck spot there or a pocket or a banner, something like that, you can go ahead and stamp on that side because the banner or the tuck spot or the pocket will cover it, won't show. So just keep that in mind for, you know, your page layouts. Really, it's just a case of thinking ahead of time. Once you've got, you know, your signature together as your papers, then you pull out your ephemera, you pull out your stamps, and you figure out, you know, where you want what to go where. And like I said, if I want to do embossing, then having my pages together, I mean, that would be really hard. You've got embossing powder that you want to shake off and different things like that, right? So that's, you know, how I do it. I'll go through, I'll add all my tabs before I add anything else. You can do it the other way if you want. Really works both ways. Doesn't really matter. What else can I tell you? yeah, I'm almost done. So I will put this together and I'll come back with a video showing that. And episode 6 will be happening pretty soon for the tips, tricks, and tools. So please stay tuned. Thanks for watching. And if you have any comments, please leave them at the bottom and I will respond. I promise. Have a great day. Bye.